My name is Zara Cole. Before any of this, I was a person. I want you to know that. I had opinions about things that had nothing to do with him. I thought Toni Morrison was the greatest American novelist, and I made excellent jollof rice, and I'd been teaching myself Portuguese because I'd decided I was going to live in Lisbon before I turned 40. I had a best friend named Priya who could make me laugh until I couldn't breathe. I had a mother who was sick and stubborn, and still the funniest person in any room she entered. I was a person with a life. Then I walked into Mercer Industries, and my life became something I barely recognized. What would transpire between my billionaire boss and I is definitely none of your business, but I know you're nosy.
So like this video and subscribe if you haven't already while I spill the tea.
Sign it. The contract slid across the mahogany desk. I didn't pick it up. I read it where it lay, because I'd learned early that the way you handle a document tells people what you think of yourself. His name was Ethan Mercer, 41, self-made, which he wore like armor. He'd built Mercer Industries from a consulting firm with 6 employees into a multinational with 4,000. And he was on the cover of 3 different magazines in the lobby downstairs. He was also, I would learn, one of the loneliest people I'd ever met. But that was later. Right now, he was just a man with cold gray eyes watching me read his contract like I was a problem he was weighing. I don't work for men who think money purchases obedience, I said. You haven't heard the number yet. I don't need to. Something shifted in his expression. Not quite interest, more like recalibration. You're here because Holden Consulting folded and you haven't found a position in 4 months, he said. You're here because your mother is at St. Catherine's and the bill is currently at... Don't. My voice came out harder than I intended. Don't use my mother. He held my gaze. I'm not using her. I'm being honest with you. Which is more than most people in this building manage. You need this. I need someone capable. That's the transaction. The brutal clarity of it almost made me respect him. Almost. 1 year, he continued. Executive assistant. You'll travel with me, attend every significant meeting, manage my schedule and communications. The salary is twice what Holden was paying you. And if I decide halfway through that you're insufferable, then you'll leave. The penalty clause is standard. You can have your lawyer review it. I don't have a lawyer. Use mine. He slid a business card across the desk. His job is to protect my interests, but he has ethics. He'll tell you if something's wrong with it. That surprised me enough that I almost missed what he said next. I need someone who can think, not just execute. The last 3 people in this role lasted a combined 8 months. Why? Because I'm difficult. At least he knew. I picked up the contract. The first 3 weeks were, as promised, difficult. He rewrote my emails, rearranged schedules I'd spent an hour building, circled errors in red on printed documents like a professor who'd stopped believing in his students. You're anticipating what I asked for, he said once, without looking up. I need you to anticipate what I actually need. Those are different things. Then tell me what you need. If I have to tell you, we've already failed. I went home that night and had a long conversation with Priya. Walk out, she said immediately. The salary, walk out and I will personally help you find something else. Zara, nobody should talk to you like that. She wasn't wrong. But here's the thing, I couldn't explain to her, couldn't really explain to myself. Underneath the arrogance, he wasn't actually wrong. The email I'd drafted had been reactive. The schedule I'd built had been logical, but not strategic. He was brutal in the way of someone who had no patience for wasted motion. And I had, without meaning to, been wasting his. So I stayed. And I stopped trying to anticipate his requests. I started trying to anticipate his problems. It took about a week before he stopped rewriting my emails. He didn't acknowledge it. But I noticed. The shift was small at first. He'd glance up from a document and I'd have already pulled the relevant file. He'd start a sentence about a meeting, and I'd finish it with the information he needed. But we developed a rhythm that felt less like employee and employer and more like, I didn't have a word for it. Chess partners, maybe. 2 people who'd figured out how the other one thought. He still wasn't warm. I wasn't expecting warm. But one afternoon in a conference room full of senior executives, when I slid a corrected figure across the table before he reached the wrong number in his presentation, when his eyes found mine for half a second and something passed between us that wasn't professional at all. I understood that we'd crossed into different territory. "You should be in the room," he said afterward in the hallway. Just the two of us. I was in the room, not in the back, taking notes, at the table. It was the closest he came to a compliment for the first month. I went home and told my mother about it. She was in bed, and I'd tired from her treatment, but she laughed, that big, unself-conscious laugh, and said, "Baby, be careful of powerful men who finally notice you. They think noticing is the same as deserving." I told her she was being dramatic. She raised an eyebrow with the authority only mothers have. I should have listened. "We leave Sunday," he said on a Thursday morning, not looking up from his laptop. "Tokyo, then Singapore." "For how long?" 2 weeks, at minimum." I thought about my mother, about Priya's birthday dinner on the 14th, about the Portuguese class I'd enrolled in on Tuesday evenings. "I'll need to make arrangements," I said. He did look up then. I think he'd expected resistance or excuses. What he got was a woman opening her calendar and already calculating. "For your mother," he said. Not a question. Yes. A beat. Something in his expression. Not softness exactly, more like acknowledgement. "Take whatever time you need this evening. I'll have the travel documents ready tomorrow." It was a small thing, but from him, it was significant. Sunday morning, 5:58. I stood outside his building. Suitcase, coffee. I was too nervous to drink. The city still half dark, smelling of rain from the night before. I'd video called my mother the previous evening. Priya had agreed to check on her twice a week. My Portuguese tutor had been understanding. I'd done everything I could do. Still, standing there, I felt the specific loneliness of being someone who holds everything together, and then has to let go of it to get on a plane. The black car arrived. He was already inside. He glanced at me once when I slid in, which then returned to the document in his hand. "You're early," he said. "You said 6. "I said be ready at 6. I expected you'd interpret that as 6:15. "Why?" "Because most people prioritize looking unrushed over being prepared." "I'm not most people." He turned a page. "No, you're not." We didn't speak again until the airport. The private jet was, objectively, obscene. Cream leather. A full bar. Enough space to forget you were in the sky. I took the seat across from him, opened my tablet, and spent the first hour reviewing everything I'd compiled on his Tokyo contacts, because that, I'd learned, was how to be useful. Not by asking what he needed, by already having it. An hour in, he closed his laptop. "Tell me what I need to know." I didn't hesitate. "Tanaka Industries. They want the acquisition, but they're stalling because they believe you're undervaluing their IP portfolio, specifically 3 patents in the sustainable materials division. They're not wrong, but they're also not going to say so directly. You'll need to make them feel understood without changing the number." He watched me. His expression was the same mask it always was. I'd learned to look past it at his eyes. "Your second meeting is with Minister Harada. He has a reputation for extended courtesy before substance. You'll need patience. I know that's difficult." I said it neutrally. He didn't react, which meant I was right. He responds well to people who ask about his work in earthquake preparedness infrastructure. That's genuine pride for him, not a performance. And the dinner. Kato Ventures. The founder, Shinji Kato, one is 29, first-generation wealth, deeply aware that older investors don't take him seriously. Don't condescend and don't be dazzled by him. Treat him like a peer. He'll give you better terms than anyone in Tokyo because he wants a partner, not a patron. Silence. I waited. "The minister," he said. "Earthquake preparedness. How'd you find that?" His daughter gave an interview last year to an architecture journal about growing up watching him work. It wasn't in any of the standard briefing materials. He was quiet for a long moment. "Where did you find it?" "I read the architecture journal." Something in his face, that near invisible flicker. I'd catalog it later as the closest he got to being impressed. "Don't get comfortable," he said, but his voice had shifted, just slightly. Tokyo moved fast, but the Tanaka meeting went the way I'd predicted. 40 minutes of careful indirection before the real conversation started. I watched him navigate it from my chair along the wall, the way he let silences grow rather than filling them, the way he acknowledged the IP concern obliquely, and then moved the conversation to long-term partnership value so smoothly that Tanaka's lead negotiator visibly relaxed. He was extraordinary at this, ruthless in strategy, but never crude. He made people feel they were getting what they wanted, even when they weren't. I spent a lot of time thinking about whether that was admirable or frightening. After the minister's dinner, walking back through the Shinjuku streets still bright at 10 p.m., he slowed his pace until we were walking side by side. "You disagree with how I handled the closing," he said. But I'd said nothing. We'd been walking in silence. "I think you left value on the table to preserve the relationship," I said. "Which might be the right call. I don't know Tanaka well enough to say." "It is the right call, but your instinct to push harder isn't wrong. You'll need to learn when the relationship is the asset." It was the first time he'd framed anything as me learning rather than me failing. I noticed. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "You can ask. Why does the relationship matter to you? You could have pushed harder and gotten the better deal. You chose not to." He walked a few steps before answering. "Because I'll need them again. Because everyone in that room will talk to other people about how this meeting felt. Reputation compounds the same way money does." "That's strategic. Then I'm asking what you actually think about them." He glanced at me sideways. "I think Tanaka built something real, and he's afraid of losing control of it. That's not a weakness to exploit. It's a legitimate fear." I looked at him. "What?" he said. "Nothing. You understand people a lot better than you let on." Understanding people and trusting them are different things. "You trust me," I said. It came out more direct than I intended. A pause. "I'm learning to," he said. The rooftop bar was his suggestion, which surprised me. After a 16-hour day, I'd expected him to disappear into work the way he usually did. Instead, he said, "I need an hour that isn't this," and took us to a place on the 38th floor of a hotel he apparently knew from a previous trip. We sat with a view of the city below us, all light and movement. And for a while neither of us spoke. He had a glass of whiskey he wasn't drinking. "You don't actually like whiskey," I said. "I don't dislike it. But you're not drinking it." "It's something to do with my hands." I looked at him. "You get restless when you can't be working." He looked back at me with something that might have been wariness. "Most people don't notice things like that." "I notice things. It's literally my job." "It's not just the job." The words landed differently than I think he meant them to. He looked away. "What was it like?" I said carefully. "Before all of this. Before the company." "Smaller," he said. "Louder. My father's house in Coventry. 4 people in 1,200 square feet." A pause. "I left at 17. Never really went back." "Why not?" "Because going back felt like admitting I couldn't get out." "Did you get out?" He looked at the city. "Financially, yes." I understood what he wasn't saying. I thought about my mother's apartment in Peckham, the cramped warmth of it, how I'd never once wanted to escape it, only to protect it. We'd both been shaped by small spaces, just differently. "You think you know me now," he said, and his voice had an edge. "I don't think I know you. I think I'm starting to." "Don't mistake proximity for understanding." "I'm not. Understanding takes longer." I held his gaze. "But you're not as unreadable as you want to be." Something moved across his face. Irritation. And underneath it, something else entirely. "Careful," he said quietly. "You keep saying that. What exactly is supposed to happen if I'm not careful?" "You'll start to matter." The words came out like he hadn't meant to say them. He stood, left cash on the table, walked toward the elevator. I sat there for a moment, heart doing things I didn't have the vocabulary for yet. Then I followed. The elevator was small. We stood on opposite sides, which still wasn't much distance. "I want to ask you something," I said. "You're going to regardless." Do you actually want people to be afraid of you? Or did you just stop caring whether they were? He looked at the floor indicator. There's a third option, he said finally. Which is? That fear is easier than the alternative. The alternative being what? The doors opened. He stepped out. Good night, Zara. First time he'd used my name. I stood in the elevator until the doors closed again. Singapore hit differently. I don't know how else to say it. Tokyo had been professional distance slowly dissolving. Singapore felt like standing too close to something that could burn you, aware of the heat, choosing not to step back. It was hotter, for one thing. The humidity wrapped around you the moment you stepped outside, the kind that makes everything feel slightly more urgent, slightly more alive. And the deals here were harder. Less relationship, more leverage. The room temperatures dropped 10 degrees whenever Ethan walked in. I watched him differently in Singapore. I'd been watching him for weeks now. That was the job. But this was different. I was watching him the way you watch something you're trying to understand before it's too late. He didn't lose. That was the thing. Even when a deal collapsed on the second day, a partnership with a Singaporean logistics firm that fell apart over indemnity terms, he didn't fracture. He sat in the post-mortem meeting, listened to his team explain what had gone wrong, and then quietly restructured the entire approach for the next round. I asked him about it afterward. You weren't angry? I said. A deal you spent 3 months building just fell apart. I was angry. You didn't show it. Because the room didn't need my anger. It needed a way forward. Where does it go? The anger. He was quiet for a moment. We were in the back of a car moving through the city, the skyline catching the last of the evening light. I run, he said. 6 a.m., most mornings. I know. I build it into your schedule. Then you know. I know when. I didn't know why. He turned to look at me. In the moving light, his face was harder to read than usual. Why does it matter? Because I'm trying to understand how you work. Not as an employee, just... I stopped. Started again. You're an interesting person, Ethan. I think you've spent a long time making sure nobody notices that. He looked away. My therapist says the same thing, he said. I blinked. It was so unexpected, so unguarded, that for a moment I didn't know what to do with it. You see a therapist? Twice a month. Have done for 6 years. A beat? Don't look so surprised. I'm not surprised, I'm just... You had a version of me in your head. Everyone has versions of people in their heads. And you keep contradicting mine. I looked at him. I think I like the real one better. He said nothing. But he didn't look away. The hotel suite situation was, in the sanitized language of corporate travel, a booking error. In practice, 1 suite, 2 bedrooms, a shared living space, and the particular awkwardness of being forced into proximity with someone you'd spent weeks carefully maintaining professional distance from. I can find another hotel, I said, at 11 p.m. during a trade summit. I'll manage. Don't be ridiculous. He set his briefcase down. 2 separate rooms. It's a large suite. It was a large suite. That wasn't the problem, and we both knew it. The first 2 nights were fine. Professionally fine. We kept opposite schedules. He was up at 6, I worked late, and the suite was large enough that we moved through it like planets in separate orbits. The 3rd night, I woke up at 2 a.m., and he was sitting in the living room in the dark. I stood in the doorway for a moment, deciding whether to go back to bed. I can hear you thinking about retreating, he said without turning around. I came and sat in the chair across from him. Can't sleep. Don't sleep much. How much is much? 4 hours. 5 if it's a good week. Ethan, that's not sustainable. I know. He said it like someone who'd been told before and was tired of being told. It's been like this since I was young. My brain doesn't know how to be quiet. I pulled my knees up. The city glittered beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows. What does it do when it won't be quiet? Runs scenarios, finds the failure points in everything. A pause. Worst case. Always worst case. That sounds exhausting. It's why the company works. It's also why I'm sitting in the dark at 2 a.m. I looked at him in profile. The tension he carried in his shoulders, the way his jaw worked slightly when he was thinking. Your father, I said carefully. What was he like? His shoulders tightened. I'd hit this wall before. You don't have to... Controlling, he said. Flat, like reading from a document. Intelligent, certain he was always the smartest person in the room, which was true often enough to make him dangerous. A beat. He thought feelings were a performance, that needing anything from anyone was weakness. And you believed him. I was 12. You believe your father. And now? He turned to look at me then. In the dark, his eyes were harder to read, which maybe made it easier for him to speak. Now I know he was wrong, he said. I'm still working on knowing it somewhere other than my head. It was the most honest thing he'd ever said to me. I felt the weight of it, the trust involved in saying it. My father left when I was 9, I said. I hadn't planned to. Just stopped being there. My mother never talked badly about him. She said he was someone who wasn't built for staying, and that wasn't a flaw in us. I paused. I spent a lot of years trying to decide if I believed her. Do you? Mostly, on good days. We sat in the quiet for a while. The city below was still moving, somewhere it was always still moving, and the suite was warm and strange and too intimate for what we were supposed to be. You should get some sleep, he said eventually. Not an order, something softer. So should you. I'll try. I stood to go. At the doorway, I paused. Well, for what it's worth, I said. You're not your father. He didn't respond. But in the morning, his shoulders were slightly less rigid than usual. The next day he was cold again, not hostile, not cruel, just sealed back up, back behind the glass. In the meetings, he didn't acknowledge me beyond the professional. In the car afterward, he was on his phone. At dinner with the investment group, he directed questions at me with the brisk efficiency he'd use with any capable assistant. I understood it, technically. What had happened the night before had been too open. He'd recalibrated. I still hated it. Did I do something? I asked in the hotel hallway after dinner, when the professional context had dropped away. No. Then what's happening? Nothing is happening. Ethan. He turned to look at me. Our last night was... I spoke out of turn, he said. You spoke honestly. There's a difference. I don't usually... He stopped. I need to keep this professional. I know. I'm not asking for anything. I know you're not. Then what are you afraid of? He looked at me for a long, unguarded moment. That I already can't. He went into his room. I stood in the hallway for a moment, my heart doing something complicated, and then went to mine. We didn't speak about it. We went back to the meetings, and the schedules, and the professional rhythm. But something had changed. There was a charge in the air between us now, acknowledged by neither of us, impossible to ignore. On the last night in Singapore, I was packed and half reading a book when he knocked on my open bedroom door. I wanted to apologize, he said. Mom, for what? For how I spoke to you after the night we talked. He stood in the doorway. He still had his jacket on, which meant he hadn't fully let himself arrive. I made you feel like you'd done something wrong by being kind to me. That was unfair. I put the book down. Okay? Apology accepted. He looked slightly wrong-footed. He'd probably prepared for resistance. You're not going to make me explain myself further? Do you want to? No. Then we're done. I looked at him. Ethan, I'm not keeping score. That's not what I'm doing here. He was quiet for a moment. Most people are, he said. I know. I'm not. He studied me the way he studied balance sheets, looking for the catch, the hidden clause. Get some sleep, I said gently. Long flight tomorrow. He almost smiled. Not quite, but almost. Good night. Nazara. The flight back was different. We still worked. There was always work. But somewhere over the Indian Ocean, he closed his laptop and said, Tell me about Lisbon. I looked up. What? You mentioned it? First week. You were on a call with a language tutor and you said something about Lisbon. He looked almost embarrassed at having remembered. Why Lisbon? I stared at him for a second. Then I told him about the plan. The vague, stubborn, beautiful plan I'd built in spare moments over 3 years. The light in that city, the tiled buildings, the way it felt, from everything I'd read, like a place that had survived a lot and decided to be beautiful anyway. He listened. Actually listened, not waiting for me to finish, but listening. "You'll get there," he said when I'd finished. "Probably." "Not probably. You're not someone who lets things go." Coming from him, it was practically a declaration. Back in London, something new took shape. He was still demanding at work, still exacting, still ruthless in meetings, still the man who could freeze a room with one look. None of that changed. But in the spaces around the work, in the elevator after everyone had gone home, in the car between late meetings, in the 30 seconds before a call connected, he was different, present, sometimes almost warm. He asked about my mother more. He remembered things I'd mentioned once in passing. He started sending me articles on subjects I'd told him I was interested in, not as tasks, just thought you'd find this relevant. I told Priya. "Don't," she said immediately. She said, "I'm not doing anything." "You're describing a man who's slowly making himself indispensable to you while keeping just enough professional distance to deny it's intentional?" She gave me a look. "He knows exactly what he's doing?" "Maybe." "Zara. He's also, Priya, he's not who I thought he was." She was quiet for a moment. "Be careful that you're seeing who he is and not who you want him to be." He kissed me on a Tuesday. We'd been in his office until past 10. Everyone else had left. I was at the secondary desk I'd claimed, working through a contract, and he was at his desk, and we were both just working. Comfortable in a silence that had taken months to build. I found an error in the contract. Flagged it. He came to look. He was standing behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of him, while pointing to a clause on the screen. "Here," I said. "I see it." Neither of us moved. I turned my head and found him closer than I'd thought, and for a moment we were both completely still. "This is probably," I started. He kissed me. Not impulsive, not desperate, at least not in the way I'd expected. It was careful at first, like a question. And then I answered it, and it became something else. When we broke apart, we were both very quiet. "I've been trying not to do that for 2 months, he said. "I know. It complicates everything." "I know. I don't know how to—" He stopped. "I'm not practiced at this, at whatever this is. Neither am I. Not with this much at stake." He looked at me. "What do you want?" I thought about what Priya had said, about my mother's warning. I thought about everything I knew about power and proximity, and the stories women tell themselves. And then I thought about the man sitting in the dark at 2 a.m. in Singapore, talking about his father. The man who'd remembered Lisbon. The man who'd sent me an article about Mozambican architecture at 11 on a Wednesday night with no explanation except reminded me of what you said. "I want to try," I said. "Carefully. Carefully," he repeated, like he was testing the word. "With full acknowledgement that this is complicated and neither of us knows what we're doing. I can work with that." And when he smiled, really smiled, not the controlled, almost smile I'd catalogued over months, I understood for the first time why people did reckless things. We were careful. Nothing changed publicly. The work was still the work. In meetings, I was still his executive assistant, and he was still the most demanding person I'd ever encountered. But in private, slowly, he opened. He showed me the company's early financials from when he'd started at 26. A shoebox of printed spreadsheets and handwritten notes he kept in a locked drawer like a relic. "I look at it when I'm losing perspective," he said. "Reminds me it was once just this." He met my mother. That wasn't planned. She called when he was in the room, and when I stepped aside to take it, she started asking pointed questions. My mother had no volume control for her curiosity, and somehow, 20 minutes later, he was sitting at the kitchen table in her flat, while she made tea she absolutely wasn't supposed to have, and asked him questions that made me want to disappear into the floor. She didn't treat him like someone impressive. She treated him like someone who'd arrived to prove himself. He was, to his visible bewilderment, entirely charmed by her. She asked if my intentions were honorable. He told me in the car afterward. She asks everyone that. She asked Priya's boyfriend. What did you tell her before I arrived? That you were complicated. And that I was taking it one day at a time. He was quiet. Then, good answer. What ended it, or rather what tried to, came from inside the company. The first sign was small. A deal that shouldn't have leaked. A competitor made a move that was too precisely timed, too accurately targeted to be coincidence. Ethan noticed. Of course he noticed. He brought in a quiet security review. Said nothing to the wider team. I told me only because I was already involved. Someone's been talking, he said. Any idea who? Not yet. He looked at me steadily when he said it. Not with accusation. I didn't read accusation in it then. More like he was deciding how much to say. I'll need you to be careful what you put in writing for the next few weeks, he said. Everything through me directly. Understood. 2 weeks later, he showed up at my flat in the rain. I knew the moment I opened the door. Not because of what was on his face. He'd sealed everything back up again, tighter than I'd seen in months. Because of what wasn't there. The version of him I'd been carefully, painstakingly getting to know, just gone. Replaced by the man from the first day, the cold architecture of him. It was you, he said. The floor dropped out. I won't minimize what happened next. He was wrong. Utterly, completely wrong. But I want to be honest. In the moment, it nearly destroyed something in me. Not because I couldn't handle being falsely accused, because it came from him. We'd built something real. I'd believed that. And the speed with which he could pivot to this, stand at my door in the rain, eyes remote, and say it was you, told me exactly how fragile the structure was under the surface. They traced it to your email account, he said. Then someone used my account. Don't. I'm not lying to you. I have never... Ethan, look at me. He looked at me. That was almost worse. He was looking right at me and still not seeing me. Everything I told you, every meeting, every deal. Yes, I had access to all of it. Because you gave me access. Because that's what you hired me to do. I held my voice steady through something that wanted to crack. Someone used that. It wasn't me. Then explain the emails. He threw the folder. Papers scattered across my floor. Printed emails, my name, my account, messages I had never written. I crouched down and picked up a page. Read it. These aren't mine, I said. Your account. Someone created a duplicate, a shadow account. I stood up. Give me 24 hours. Zara, if I'm lying, you'll have everything you need to end this. 24 hours. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he left. I sat on my floor for approximately 4 minutes. Then I opened my laptop. I didn't sleep. Not because I was falling apart, and though some part of me was, but because I was angry. Correctly, cleanly angry. And anger turned out to be useful fuel. I pulled every access log I could reach, every login timestamp. The emails had been sent between 11 p.m. and 1 a.m. on dates when I could prove exactly where I was. But that wasn't enough. Anyone could dispute timestamps. What I was looking for was the seam, the place where whoever had built this fake account had made it just slightly imperfect. Because a clone is never perfect. There's always a divergence point. I found it at 4:17 in the morning, a ghost account. Created 11 days after I started, mirroring my credentials so closely it had fooled the automated security review. But the creation metadata pointed to an internal workstation, a specific one, on the 14th floor. His building was quiet at 2 a.m. The security guard at the desk looked at me with the particular expression of someone deciding whether this was their problem. Tell him I have proof, I said. He'll see me. A phone call, a wait. The elevator. He was standing when the doors opened. Yesterday's clothes, eyes that hadn't slept. I walked past him into his office and opened the laptop on his desk. Look at the creation metadata, I said. Then look at the workstation ID. He looked, His jaw tightened. He scrolled. His breathing was very controlled. 14th floor, he said. Yes. He looked up, really looked at me, not the way he'd looked at me at my door in the rain, but properly, present. I'm sorry, he said. 2 words, but the weight behind them was considerable. I know you are, I said. That's not an absolution. No, it's not. I held his gaze. What you chose what it was easiest to believe. I need you to understand that. He held my gaze. I do, he said. I understand that. Okay, I said. Then let's find who actually did it. We worked through the night. Not romantically. I want to be clear about that. There was nothing cinematic about it. It was 2 people hunched over separate laptops in a large office, cross-referencing access logs against meeting schedules, building a picture 1 data point at a time, empty coffee cups, a shared silence that had nothing soft in it. Around 4 a.m. he ordered food from somewhere that was apparently still open and slid a container toward me without comment, and I ate without looking up from my screen. This was the version of closeness we did best, I thought. Parallel. Working toward the same thing. We're 14th floor is finance, he said at one point. I know. Narrows it to 11 people. 8. 3 of them were at the Singapore conference during the first batch of leaks. I turned my screen toward him. The workstation logs to one of 2 people. Depends which shift used it. He looked at the screen for a long time. I watched his face. Marcus? He said quietly. I didn't know the name yet. Who is my CFO? He sat back. My oldest friend. The stillness that came over him then was different from his professional stillness. That one was controlled. This one was the absence of control. The particular blankness of someone absorbing something they'd already, somewhere beneath the surface, suspected. I need more than a workstation log, he said. His voice was even, carefully even. I know. Give me 2 more days. He nodded. Said nothing else. Marcus Chen had been with Ethan since the beginning. Not an employee who'd grown with the company, a friend who'd helped build it. They'd met at 23, 2 broke and ambitious young men at a networking event they'd both attended on free tickets. Ethan had the vision. Marcus had the financial architecture. For 10 years, the company had run on the combination of those 2 things. I learned all of this from the company's origin story as written in a profile piece from 7 years ago. And then I started checking the more recent record. Resentment, I found, rarely announces itself. It shows up in small ledger adjustments, in the way someone talks about their colleague in interviews, the careful positioning, the subtle shift from we to he when discussing the company's success. In the access logs for file directories, a CFO has no professional reason to enter. In a personal email account, not quite hidden, used to forward documents to a competitor in increments small enough to seem like noise. Marcus had been meticulous. He'd built the fake account, he'd covered his tracks thoroughly, but he'd been doing it for 2 years, and 2 years is a long time to be meticulous without making one mistake. His was a timestamps mismatch on a file transfer he'd run from home, which pointed back to a personal device, which gave us the email account. I found it on the 2nd night. I called Ethan immediately. He was there within 20 minutes. He read everything twice, 3 times. He didn't speak. I watched him from across the desk and thought about what it costs a person to discover this. Not from a stranger, not from an enemy, but from someone you'd called a brother for nearly 2 decades. Someone who'd sat at your table, who'd met your difficult father and understood without explanation, who'd been, in the sparse emotional landscape of Ethan's life, one of very few constants. When he looked up, his face was completely closed. I'll call the lawyers in the morning, he said. Do you want to? No. Flat. Final. I don't want to talk about it. Okay. I want to talk about what comes next, how we limit the damage. Who needs to know, and in what order? I nodded. Okay, then let's do that. We worked until 6 a.m. The confrontation happened 2 days later. Ethan had arranged it with the lawyers present, the security team on standby, everything procedurally correct. He'd insisted on that, not for Marcus's benefit, he told me, but because he refused to handle this the way his father would have. No explosion, no punishment designed for humiliation, just the truth, laid out in a room. Marcus came in looking calm. He looked at Ethan. He looked at me. He looked at the folder on the table. Then he looked back at Ethan, and something in his face shifted. And it wasn't shame. "How long?" Ethan said. "Does it matter?" "To me it does." Marcus was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was almost conversational. "You were offered the Kellerman Group partnership 2 years ago. I brought it to you. I spent 4 months building the case for it." A pause. "You said no in 10 minutes. Didn't explain why. Just no." Ethan's expression didn't change. I explained why. "The liability exposure. You dismissed it. Like you've dismissed everything I've brought you for years. Why, because your instinct is always right, and mine is always—" Marcus stopped, restarted. "I stopped being a partner a long time ago, Ethan. I became someone you checked your decisions against so you could feel like you'd considered other options." The room was very quiet. "That's not—" Ethan started. "It is." Marcus looked at the folder. "So yes, I was angry. And yes, I made decisions I shouldn't have. But don't stand there and pretend you don't know why." I watched Ethan absorb this, the way his jaw worked, the precise cost of being told something he hadn't let himself hear. "The decision not to take Kellerman was correct," he said quietly. "They collapsed 14 months later. The liability exposure was real. I should have explained that better. I should have—" He stopped, started again. "I failed you as a partner. That's true. When it doesn't justify what you did." "No," Marcus said. "It doesn't." Silence. "You'll have my resignation within the hour," Marcus said, "and my cooperation with the investigation." He looked at me then, just briefly. And I understood that in his version of this story, I was a symbol. Proof that Ethan had something beyond the company, something personal and warm that Marcus had watched from the outside and decided was one more thing he'd been denied. I didn't say anything. It wasn't mine to say. "I'm sorry," Marcus said to Ethan. "It sounded real?" "Most of it sounded real." "I know," Ethan said. Marcus left. Ethan stood very still in the emptied room, and I stayed at the table, and after a long time he sat down heavily and put his face in his hands. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't offer the words that would have made it smaller than it was. I just sat next to him and stayed. Eventually his hand found mine on the table. "He wasn't wrong," Ethan said quietly. "About the partnership, about how I treated him. No, he wasn't entirely wrong. But both things are true," I said. "You let him down. He chose this. Both of those things are true at the same time." He turned his hand over and held mine properly. "I don't know how to do this part," he said, "the part where I was also at fault." "You don't have to know how. You just have to do it." "How?" "Slowly, honestly, the same way you do everything else when you're doing it right." He was quiet for a long time. "I accused you," he said. "You did. I came to your door and Ethan, I need to say it." "Then say it." "I came to your door and I chose the worst version of what was possible because—" He stopped. "Because I've been waiting for something to go wrong. Since Singapore, since I let myself—" He turned to look at me. "I've been waiting for a reason to believe this was a mistake." "I know. And when it came, I picked it up. Yes. That's not—" He exhaled. "That's not the person I want to be with you?" I looked at him for a long moment. "Then be a different one," I said. "That's all it takes, mostly. Just keep choosing differently." He held my gaze. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It just looks like simple from the outside." He raised our joined hands slightly, looking at them like he was checking they were real. "Don't leave," he said. "I'm not leaving. I mean—" He paused. "In general, I know I have no right to ask that. I know I haven't earned it. But, Ethan, I'm not leaving." He nodded. Once. Let out a long, slow breath. We thought it was over. We were wrong. Marcus, in the weeks before the confrontation, had set a second fire. We found out on a Thursday evening when Ethan's phone and mine rang simultaneously. That particular synchronization that never means good news. His lawyer's voice was careful in a way that scared me more than alarm would have. Federal investigation, fraud allegations, insider trading. Documents had been provided to regulators suggesting systematic corruption at the highest level of Mercer Industries. Fabricated documents, but comprehensive ones. He planned for this, Ethan said very quietly after the call. If he was ever caught, this was already in motion. We'll prove it's fabricated. Yes, eventually. These things take... He stopped. They'll freeze accounts, seize assets, the board will panic. The press will... Another stop. This will be very bad before it gets better. He looked at me. You should distance yourself, he said. No. Zara, I said no. Listen to me. Professionally, personally, if you're publicly connected to me while this investigation runs, your reputation... Then my reputation takes the hit. I'm not letting you... You're not letting me anything. I held his gaze steadily. I choose. That's how this works. I choose what I'm willing to risk, and you don't get to make that call for me. I paused. I chose to stay in Singapore when you shut me out. I chose to spend 2 nights pulling your company's access logs apart to prove I was innocent. I choose this, Ethan. Stop trying to protect me out of the room. He stared at me. Why? He said. Not rhetorical, genuine. Because I love you, I said. Oh, and because I'm a person who finishes what she starts. And because you are not. My voice steadied. You are not someone who deserves to go through this alone, and I refuse to be someone who lets you. The silence that followed was very long. Then he crossed the room and held me in the way I'd come to recognize as his most honest self. Not performative, not graceful, just close and still and real. I love you, he said into my hair. I don't say it enough. I don't say it easily. But I love you. I know you do. I've known since Tokyo. I knew in Singapore and didn't have words for it. I know. He pulled back to look at me. Say it again. I love you? I held his gaze. Now let's talk about the lawyers. What followed was the hardest 3 months of my life. Harder even, armed in the years of managing my mother's illness and my own finances, and the relentless low-grade fear of being one emergency away from drowning. This was harder because it was public, and because every day brought a new headline, and because I watched a man I loved have his name treated like evidence. But we'd been through the kind of hard that breaks people, and we'd come out of it intact, and that turned out to matter. We built a legal strategy. We tracked down every piece of fabricated documentation and found the seams in it. Marcus had been clever, but not flawless, and 2 years of watching Ethan operate had taught me how to find the places where things were not quite right. We found the actual trading records. We found the communications Marcus had used to plant the evidence. And we found witnesses, former employees of the competitor Marcus had been feeding information to, who were, once the investigation turned in the right direction, quite willing to cooperate. Ethan's lawyers were excellent. We were better. The charges were dropped on a gray Wednesday morning in November. Ethan's lawyer called at 8:15 and said the words, and Ethan sat on the edge of the bed and was quiet for a very long time. I sat next to him. The city was happening outside the window, indifferent as cities are, and the morning light was flat and ordinary, and we were just 2 people on the edge of a bed in November. It's over, he said. Yes. The company is still... He exhaled. The damage is significant. I know. 3 board members have already resigned. The institutional investors, I know. He turned to look at me. You're very calm. Because the worst is over. The rebuild... Ethan. I took his hand. We've been building things for months. We're good at it. We'll do it again. He looked at me for a long moment. I'm going to step down, he said. I didn't argue. I'd seen it coming. Why? Because the company needs a new face, new trust. I'm carrying too much noise now. Even cleared, I'm still the story. He paused. And honestly, because I've been thinking about what Marcus said, about what I built and how I ran it, and whether the thing I built is actually what I wanted to build. He looked at his hands. I don't think it was. I think I built it because I needed to prove I could. And then I kept building it because I didn't know what else to do with myself. And now? Now I want to build something smaller. It's something I actually believe in. A pause. With a partner, a real one, if she'll have me. I looked at him. 50-50, I said. Obviously. Equal say on everything? Within reason. Ethan. Yes, equal say on everything. Then yes, I said. She'll have you. The new company took 18 months to get right. We were methodical about it in a way Mercer Industries, built on speed and instinct and the particular mania of a man with something to prove, had never been. We talked about what we actually wanted it to do. We turned down revenue in the early months because the clients weren't right. We hired slowly and explained the reasoning behind every decision to everyone in the room. It was, from the outside, probably not very dramatic. From the inside, it was the most interesting thing I'd ever been part of. We argued constantly. But that should be said clearly, we were not harmonious. We're not two halves of a whole who never conflicted. We disagreed about strategy, about hiring, about timelines, about when to push and when to hold. He still had the instinct to move fast and unilaterally. I still had the instinct to want consensus. We spent 18 months learning how to fight about something and come out the other side with a better answer than either of us had started with. It turned out we were quite good at that. It also turned out that the company we built in that 18 months, careful, real, built on things we actually believed, was successful in a way that felt different from Mercer Industries' success. Less like conquest, more like something that belonged. My mother, who had been following all of this with the avidity of someone watching a very long and personal film, came to the launch event and spent most of it talking to Ethan rather than me. "What did she say to you?" I asked him afterward. "She asked if I'd learned anything." "What did you say?" I said yes. She asked what. I said I'd learned that I was someone who'd spent his whole life treating emotion as a problem to be solved, and that I'd met someone who'd shown me it was actually just information, and that once I stopped fighting it, I could use it. She liked that. She said it was the right answer, but that she'd be watching. He paused. She also said she wants grandchildren, while she's still young enough to be inappropriate around them. I covered my face with my hands. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be. I liked it." And he said it in the way he said things he meant completely, quiet and direct and entirely without performance. He proposed on a Tuesday, not a significant Tuesday, not a planned one. We were at home, the flat we'd moved into the previous year, not large, not designed to impress anyone, just ours. And he'd made dinner, which he'd been learning to do with the same focused intensity he applied to everything. And we were at the table and the food was actually good and I said so. He looked at me for a moment. Then he got up and went to the bedroom and came back with a box. "I've been carrying this for 3 months, he said, standing at the table with the box in his hand and an expression I'd never quite seen on him before. Nervous. Actually nervous. I kept waiting for the right moment, and then I realized I was doing the thing I always do, waiting for conditions to be perfect before I act, and the conditions are never going to be more perfect than you telling me dinner is good. He opened the box. The ring was simple, not a statement, just a beautiful thing. "I know what I am," he said. "I know I'm difficult, and I know I have more unfinished work on myself than I used to admit. I know I've hurt you badly once, and that you chose to stay anyway, and that I don't take that for granted." He paused. "I know that you are... Zara, you are the most complete person I have ever met. You walked into my office, and within 3 weeks, you'd seen something in me I'd spent 20 years hiding, and you didn't use it against me. You just held it carefully." His voice had gone rough. "Or I want to spend my life being worthy of that. I want to try." I was crying before he finished. "Yes," I said. "I haven't asked yet." "Yes." "Zara?" "Ethan, the answer is yes. Ask the question." He laughed. That real laugh, the one I'd worked so hard to earn and still considered a small miracle every time I heard it. "Will you marry me?" "Yes." I stood up. "Come here." He came here, The wedding was small. My mother, Priya and her partner, 4 colleagues who had become real friends, Ethan's therapist, who he'd invited after some visible internal debate, and who turned out to be a very pleasant man who cried during the vows, which Ethan found both alarming and moving. No press, no performance, no version of ourselves designed for anyone else's consumption. Just us, in a room full of people who actually knew us, saying things we meant. I'd written my own vows, and I'm not going to reproduce them here because they were mine. What I'll say is this. I'd written them around the idea of visibility, of being someone who sees you and chooses you with that information, not despite it, and not because of some curated version of it, but because of the full complicated truth of it. He cried when I read them. He didn't seem to care who noticed. His vows were short. He'd struggled with length. He'd told me that, ruefully, 2 nights before, because he kept writing too much and then cutting it because it felt like too much, and then realizing the cutting was the same old avoidance in a different shape. So he'd kept what remained after he stopped editing for protection. What remained was, I spent a very long time believing that needing someone was the same as losing something. You showed me it was the opposite. I'm not a finished person, but I'm a better one than I was before you, and I intend to keep going. My mother was audibly delighted. Priya, to her credit, did not say I told you so. She said it later, at the reception, with a glass raised. 5 years on. Our daughter is 2.5 and appears to have inherited Ethan's focus and my stubbornness, which his therapist, who has become something of a family friend, says is either going to make her formidable or very exhausting. Probably both. She's asleep now. It took 40 minutes and the reading of a book I now have memorized. But she's asleep. I come back to the living room and Ethan is on the sofa with a document, and he looks up, and that thing that happens, the thing that still happens years in, happens. Where he just settles, slightly, when I walk into a room, like something that was held at tension releasing by a degree. How much longer? I ask, nodding at the document. 20 minutes. I sit next to him. He lifts his arm without looking up, and I tuck myself underneath it and read my book, and he reads his document, and the flat is quiet and warm and ordinary. After a while, he sets the document down. I've been thinking about the Nairobi expansion, he says. I know. I've been thinking about it too. And I think we go. But we go right. Proper local partnership, not extraction, which means it takes longer and costs more upfront. He nods. That's what I think too. So why were you still thinking about it? Because I like thinking through things with you. I look at him. He says this kind of thing more easily now than he used to. It still lands every time. You're getting better at that, I say. At what? Saying the thing. I've been practicing. He turns to look at me. Is it working? Yes. I put my book down. Lisbon, I say. He doesn't ask what I mean. We've been talking about Lisbon in the ongoing half-completed way of people with a small child and a growing business for 2 years now. September, he says. October is better. The light. October, he agrees. I lean back against him. Outside, the city is doing what cities do, relentless and indifferent and beautiful. Inside, our daughter is asleep. The business proposal on the coffee table can wait until morning. The Portuguese I've been learning, slowly, steadily, refusing to let it go, runs through my head occasionally now in the spaces between thoughts, which my tutor says means it's finally taking hold. I think about who I was the morning I stood outside his building with a suitcase and a coffee too anxious to drink. How I'd felt the loneliness of being someone who holds everything together and then has to let go of it to walk through a door. I don't feel that now. I feel held, which isn't the same as dependent. It's closer to the thing I'd always wanted and didn't have the vocabulary for, a life where someone else also has their hands on the weight. Ethan presses a kiss to my hair. What are you thinking? He asks. I think about how to say it. That it turned out right, I say. He's quiet for a moment. It turned out right, he agrees. And outside the window the city moves, and inside the nursery our daughter breathes in the dark, and between us there is the ordinary, extraordinary thing of 2 people who chose each other. Clearly, respond correctly with full information, and keep choosing, which is, in the end, the whole story.